One. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Delusions of Grandeur. I'm your host for today, and we are going to go on about another haunted house kind of a film today. And as we've been following the ghostly trail of films that have to deal with this kind of thing. And this particular film was filmed in 1963, directed by Robert Wise, and it was adapted from the novel of Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House by Nelson Gidding into The Haunting. And it stars Julie Harris, Claire Bloom, Richard Johnson, and Russ Tamblyn. Now, Russ Tamblyn, he's been in a few films that I personally know. Seven Brides for Seven Brothers as Gideon Ponape, and The West Side Story. So it's interesting to have him play in here. I believe. Well, let me just say what IMDb says about this film before we go on.
Okay.
Hill House has stood for about 90 years and appears haunted. Its inhabitants have always met strange, tragic ends. Now, Dr. John Markaway has assembled a team of people who he thinks will prove whether or not the house is haunted. So,
we didn't know the answer in advance.
first impressions of the film. Why don't you, Boris? And thank you for coming back with me. I know it took us a couple of days to get go on about this, but what were your first impressions of this film? And I know this isn't a first time watch for you.
I watched it a few times now. Well, my first impressions were kind of mixed, actually. All in all, I'm glad I saw the movie, but one thing I kind of had a problem with, well, spoiler alert, is throughout the movie we kind of happen to meet multiple ghost characters who do different things to people in the house, but then in the end we don't really find out who those ghosts were and why exactly they were doing those particular things they were doing. Like some of them were banging on the doors, or at some point we heard a man talking, a woman laughing, and a child crying, and we never got to know what exactly those sounds were about, what happened to those ghosts while they were still alive. Well, that's my one problem with this movie, but aside of that, I really liked it. It was quite suspenseful and quite well done, in my opinion. I just wish this part was better explained in the story, but aside of that, it was pretty good.
Okay. My first impressions of this film were actually quite some years ago. When I was younger, I probably saw it around the same time that I saw The House on Haunted Hill, um, uh,
Makes
uh,
sense.
which which was also from the '60s, and I think it was done several years before this one. So maybe about 4 years thereabouts, because I think it was 1959, 1960, and this one was in 1963. So around that
Yeah.
time, there were a ton of films that were haunted house types that had come out around that time. I think 13 Ghosts was another one that was around that time period. But this one was unique in the sense that it had kind of a history of. I mean, in the very beginning of the film, we get the whole saying that the person who owns the house now thinks the house was born bad. So to me, you have a history of these people, the people related with. I mean, you got Hugh Crain, who supposedly built the house, and he built he didn't really like people, but his first wife died before she even got there in a carriage accident, and the second one, well, they don't go too much into detail with that one, and then there was a companion who apparently was caring for his daughter Abigail, and then there, of course, was Abigail herself. And we get a very interesting transformation piece in this very beginning, as you said, from little girl to to a little bit older woman to old woman, and then we hear that she had actually died.
Yeah, that part was very impressive in my opinion. I mean, we kind of see the girl transform to an adult and then to an old woman, which means back in the day when the movie was made, they had to find at least three persons who looked so similar to each other because those all the versions of Abigail really looked very similar to each other, and nowadays I assume people could do it relatively easily with CG effects, but back then it probably wasn't so easy, which is why I really found that scene quite impressive.
I thought so too. I mean, I like the fact that you get a history of what happened with the house before you meet the character of Dr. Markway. And when we finally see him, he's talking to the elderly a woman who still owns the house, and basically he's not allowed to rent the house until he agrees that one of the people who her nephew Luke can be part of that. In the book, there were 8 people that responded to the letters of Markway, and 4 people showed up. The rest kind of made excuses and basically those 3 other people were to be expected.
Well, I must say that was one thing I kind of liked about this movie. Like in some other movies we have discussed so far, it was like several people are gathered in a house and we get to know the whole bunch of them at the same time, and it kind of gets difficult to catch up on who is who and what happened in each character's backstory and so on. And in this case, we had much fewer characters, and that made the story much easier to follow.
It did. The players and cast members, we got Julie Harris, who evidently is this a woman. The book says she's about 32 years old. So I'm not exactly sure how old she is. She appears in the movie, but to me, she looks like she's about 32. Um, so she's evidently speaking to her sister and brother-in-law and about the situation that Dr. Markway has presented to her, and they really don't want her to go. In fact, they're very demanding and very insistent on her not using the car. to the extent where it looks like they're controlling her life.
Um,
And
yeah.
we get the sense that she has been shut in, and she's been taking care of her mother for like almost her entire life. Um, but what we don't get until she actually gets to the house is that she only died 2 months ago. Um, so um, her mother's death is relatively new to her, although she does state that she really didn't care that she died. uh,
uh,
and it is because of the attitude that her mother had towards her. Um, in fact, there's a scene in here where she hears banging, and she gets up like in the middle of the night, and she's like, "Okay, mother, I'll come to you." And then she realizes she's
uh,
in the house.
uh, yeah, like it. Well,
What do you think of Eleanor's character?
well, actually, I found the character very sympathetic, and actually, to an extent, I found her relatable because I kind of know what it feels like to just want to escape your reality and just experience something completely new, like what she wanted to experience.
I
And
felt I think I found her relatable before I hit college. I I very much lived with my parents up until a certain point in my life, and because of my disability, I think that my parents were very protective of me, and
hmm,
so college was a different experience, and I felt like she did right before I went off to college. I was like, suddenly I found a sense of freedom, you
well, I
know.
can imagine, although in my case, I don't really have problems with my parents, fortunately, but generally, sometimes there are situations when I feel similar to how Eleanor felt in the movie. So, yeah. Uh,
But I think everyone has a sense of being cooped up at times, sometimes with the people that they're living with. And I think when you think about that to the times of 10, I mean, increase that feeling. I mean, then you can probably feel what she's feeling, and you can somewhat see, the sense that she feels like she never wants to leave Hill House, because her life has been just that bad, you know.
yeah.
So, what do you think about the character of Theo?
Phew, well, first of all, I thought she was very good looking, but aside of that, she was, uh, how do I say, a bit. Uh, 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 I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of the right word. We didn't really get to know her very well, in my opinion. She somehow remained very mysterious throughout the movie. We know she apparently has ESP and so on, but yeah, like there are scenes when, at least from what I understood, like her attitude towards Eleanor changes from time to time, and it's difficult to figure out what she actually thinks. Or at least that's the impression I got.
What's interesting um, about Julie Harris is that some of the actors um, thought she was a little bit difficult to get along with, only in the respect because she wouldn't hang out with them outside of the filming process. She wouldn't socialize with them afterwards, and the reason that she said that she didn't do that is to kind of um, get the sense of alienation that she needed for her character. Um, the alienation that she had from everyone. I mean, on the set, she had to be a separate person because
Who?
in order to feel that kind of aloneness for the character. So
Wow. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
neither did I until I read up on it. But apparently, Robert Wise had seen her on stage, and evidently Susan Hayward, another actress, was reported to have been in the running for one of the two female leads, but Julie Harris was chosen because he felt that she was the right part for the
Hmm.
psychological. She was Eleanor was psychologically fragile, and Harris seemed to
Yeah.
pull off that psychological feel of Eleanor, where she was already somewhat unstable before she even came across into to an existence. So,
Yeah.
evidently, Russ Tamblyn, he was under contract to MGM at the time, and he initially turned down the role as Luke because he felt that the character was a jerk.
Well, I didn't really find him that bad.
But the studio at the time forced him to reconsider, threatening him with suspension. And Tamlin told the British Cinema magazine in 1995 that while reading the script the second time, he realized the character was much more interesting. Um, and he said, "This is the ironic part. It turned out to be one of my favorite films that he'd ever been in."
Oh, wow.
So, um, I guess a stunt performer by the name of Connie Tilton appears twice in the film. She portrays the death of the second Mrs. Crane by flinging herself backwards down a flight of stairs.
Ooh.
And an uncredited actress by the name of Frida Knorr is seen as shots before and after the fall. It is her face the audiences associate with the second Mrs. Crane. Tilton also appears when Abigail Crane's nurse companion hangs herself at the top of the spiral staircase in the library, although uncredited actress Rosemary Dorkin is seen climbing the stairs and going past the camera. It is Tilton's body that suddenly appears in shot again as the nurse companion hangs herself.
Oh, wow.
So we have that, and that's in that very beginning sequence where we see what leads up to the beginning of the story. Now, once they get to the house, they do meet the Dudleys. First, we meet Mr. Dudley, and he's kind of apprehensive, kind of mysterious about letting Eleanor in the house at first.
Uh,
In fact,
yeah.
he's almost downright rude. What do you think?
Yeah, he was a bit rude, and Mrs. Dudley was a bit rude too. And actually, I found Mrs. Dudley even stranger than her husband. Like she had a really unique personality with the way she spoke and everything. For a moment, actually, I thought she would be a ghost or something.
Well, she had her select things that she needed to say, to warn them about how when they leave, no one will be able to hear them in the night, in the dark.
Yeah.
And she's very practical. She tells them that there's a time for breakfast, a time for lunch, and a time for dinner, and that's why when she comes into the breakfast area and says, I clean up at 10, and they're like shut up, you know.
Yeah.
And she's very particular about her when she prepares the lunch, when she prepares the dinner, and all that jazz. But she has a very eerie smile right after she
Oh
says
yeah.
some of the stuffs. So it's like she's enjoying saying some of these eerie things.
Indeed.
But let's see. So some of the things that happen are the ladies when they finally get together when they're walking down the hallway, they start to say things like they feel eyes on them, and they feel the presence. In fact, Eleanor says at one point, "The house is alive."
Uh, yeah, I think that's mentioned multiple times throughout the movie, if I remember correctly. Or
And
did I, uh, uh, or did I mix that up with House on Haunted Hill? I'm not sure now.
it might have been, but to me, I thought I only heard her say it once, that the house was alive, but she did say several times that she wanted to never leave Hill House several times.
Yeah, but
um,
did no other character mention the house being alive?
See, my problem with this film, and every time I see it, is I find that the characters of Luke and the character of Theo were downright rude to Eleanor as the film went on. They did not believe her when she saw or heard some of these things that she saw, and thought that she might have been an attention seeker, just to seek attention, because I don't think Theo nor Luke believed in the supernatural at any given point in time. Not entirely, but it is said that Theo could predict certain things. In the book,
Uh,
she it was said that someone held some symbols on some cards in a totally different room, that she could not have seen, and she could mostly tell what those symbols or whatever was on those cards without even looking at
yeah, that's her ESP. Uh,
them. Yep.
I actually heard about that before. There was something similar in Ringu, in the Japanese version of the Ring. That's what it reminded me of.
So I mean, she knew that Nell wanted a new hairdo do right before she went into the room. So that is in part due to her ESP as well. But then she was saying something about her hairdo the next day, and so I felt like Theo just got ruder and ruder to her, and they just couldn't seem to stand one another. Um, and the doctor kept pairing them together to have her look after her, and every time she was alone with her, it's like they were like two
Yeah,
female cats in the same room.
Yeah, but
hissing and meowing at each other to no end. You could
yeah.
almost imagine them getting into a small cat fight. But what did you think of? Did you see the animosity that it seemed like they had between each other?
Well, yeah, sometimes there was tension between them, but sometimes it felt like they were getting along a little better, which is why I said what I said about Theo earlier, that it was a bit difficult to figure out what her actual thoughts on the whole thing were.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like 1 minute she was hot and 1 minute she was cold towards Eleanor. I
Yeah,
mean, the first night it seemed like they were getting along because all of a sudden it got real cold. They started hearing banging, and the banging got closer, and then the door started to rattle. And the same thing happened later when they were sleeping downstairs, and Mrs. Markham had come. Um, all throughout, what did you think of Dr. Markham?
oh, Dr. Markway was a pretty cool character, actually. Like, at the very beginning, when we only hear him talk before we see him, we actually get a very different impression of him from the way he appears later on. Like he says something, I can't really repeat it word by word anymore, but something about how the things that happened in the house were good for his experiments and so on. Like almost like he is glad that those bad things happened, which makes it seem like he was going to be more eccentric, more sinister, but then when we actually get to know him, he is really not that bad. He actually cared about all the people who were there with him. Yeah, he was a pretty interesting character.
I think so too. I mean, he was he definitely played the character to the hilt. I mean, he obviously told the patriarch um, that owned the house at the moment, and she asked him, "Well, do you have any ladies coming to the or women that are coming to the house?" And he's like, "Yeah." "Are you a married man, sir?" And he's like, "Yes." "So your wife will be coming with you?" And he's like, "Well, no, my wife, she doesn't exactly think fondly of my experiments, so she will not be attending the experiment." Well, then we should actually have someone of our family go along with you, so, almost to be like a guardian for the women, so that he doesn't get in trouble, because then he will be a married man with two unmarried women.
Yeah.
But do you think on purpose he doesn't tell the ladies that he is married?
Well, actually, no, I didn't think he had a reason not to tell them. I actually got more of the impression that it just wasn't brought up. And yeah, Eleanor got her hopes up with him without knowing that he was married. But since I watched the movie twice before we went into this discussion, I actually paid more attention. And from what I saw, he actually wasn't making any advances towards Eleanor, but
He was giving her
apparently.
nice compliments. He was telling her that she looked pretty, and things of that nature, which I don't think in her entire lifespan she has had many male suitors in her life
Uh,
or male romantic things. At least her character doesn't seem to have had. any male relationship in her life. So to have a man give her such compliments was probably something that felt very good to her at that moment.
Oh,
So
well,
I,
yeah, you have a point.
I would have to assume that because he was the first good-looking man to ever pay her some compliments, it's it's not unheard of that a woman can start to feel things um, for that man. It's just I think she felt a few more strong feelings than he was, and then
Yeah.
and Theo thought that she was throwing herself wantonly at him. Uh, 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 you know, so she was trying to warn her, um, even though she was being snarky towards her.
Yeah.
What did you think about the things that were happening in the house? Um, do you think that some of the things that were happening were unexplainable?
Oh, well, like I said before, yeah, I did feel there. The movie should have explained it a bit better. When I was watching it for the first time, those scenes were really suspenseful, and I would say they were really well done. But yeah, I was looking forward to the moment when we actually get to find out what's happening there, who exactly the ghosts are, what happened to them, and why they are doing what they're doing. That was what I was looking forward to the most. But then in the end we didn't really get to know much about that, so that was why I was a bit disappointed. But yeah, those scenes were still pretty well done, like I said, and yeah.
I think so. What did you think about the house itself? Um, did you like the way the house?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, I did. The house looked really cool.
let's see. So let's see. Okay, so the house itself, the Hill House exterior, was at Eddington Park Hotel, Elderminster, Stratford upon Avon, Warwickshire, England, UK. The exterior scenes, some of them were done at Eddington Park in Warwickshire, England. Um, some of it was done at Borehamwood Studios in Hertfordshire, England, and England itself, and also at Austria. So when Eleanor drives out under of the underground parking garage, that was done at Austral House, Basingham Avenue, London, England. So
Oh, wow, I didn't know.
just a few things. Let's see what else. Oh, evidently the original cut of the movie, shown 24:9:3 at Filmhouse Edinburgh, had several differences from the general release print. There was an alternate opening with a voiceover by Mrs. Sanderson's character in place of the Markway monologue. The titles prior to this scene are slightly different. The history of Hill House scene continues into the meeting with Mrs. Sanderson and Markway, but in this version, it is Sanderson who is doing most of the talking. The
Oh,
following scene from the general release print of Markway listing his subjects on a blackboard is missing. In its place is a scene where Theo throws her lover out of her apartment and next to a photo of her lover writes, "I hate you," in a mirror in lipstick, looks at her reflection and mutters, I hate you too. She then receives her invitation from Markway. This is delivered to her by her landlady, who requires the excess postage to be paid. Theo already knows this is to be paid, and there is a humorous exchange concerning her ESP or her gift. There are several extended scenes involving Eleanor's inner thoughts, most of which tie into her thoughts on her possible relationship with Markway. The scene showing her traveling to Hill House is extended with more inner monologue material, including a couple of shots of her turning onto Route 238 and commenting on Journey's End in Lover's Meeting.
Oh,
So, and the Morning Heart scene runs longer and continues more monologue from both Eleanor and Markway. This print had a title card prior to the MGM logo. The print is on loan from the National Film and Television Archive.
wow, that's interesting. Can those scenes be watched anywhere?
I'm not sure, to be honest. It'd be nice to see if they could hunt down this film print and put it on some kind of release in the future. I wouldn't mind seeing some of these original extended scenes.
Oh
So,
yeah.
but in any case, as far as Luke is concerned, he can be kind of a jerk, but there are some. I think there is a reason for him to be there, if not to be a drunk, to be a skeptic of the situation, because he still doesn't believe anything until that night where they're supposed to be staying inside the parlor or whatnot. When he goes down for a drink, that's when he starts to hear the noises himself. And
Yeah.
um now, does Eleanor in here initially die in this particular version,
Uh,
or does she just go mad? What do you think?
in in this movie,
Correct. In this film,
well, as far as we saw, she did die. Uh, she hit the tree with the car.
correct. So it's very interesting that someone actually dies in this haunted film, or this haunted house. I mean, there is a couple of people who died in House on Haunted Hill, uh, but what did you think about her death in here?
Well, I found it kind of sad. Since there weren't many deaths in the movie, actually there wasn't any death until, well, except for those at the beginning, there weren't
Correct.
any until the end. Yeah. I thought it was pretty sad. She didn't deserve to end that way.
No, she didn't deserve to end that way per se, but I do believe that her mind was then at rest. I mean, she didn't have to go home. She could actually finally stay at Hill House.
Uh, well,
um,
yeah.
I guess in a sense. But she should have been allowed to live a normal life. I think. I mean, she thought of this place as an escape, a place to get away from her own way of living that she was living at that point in time. So um, she could have lived the rest of her life, but in a sense, Do you think it was the house that drove her to her death, or do you think it was paranoia?
Well, I did think the house was messing up with her mind a bit and made her drive into a tree.
What did you think about Mrs. Markway showing up?
Phew. Well, that was actually a pretty good plot twist. The whole subplot of her being in the house, it was actually pretty well done. Like, she appeared with the attitude she had, like she was dismissing the whole story about ghosts and so on. She didn't believe in any of that. That was kind of a death flag for her character. I thought she would get killed there, and then she disappeared, and then there was that jump scare when she popped up in front of Eleanor and scared her, and it did kind of look like she was a ghost at that point, and yeah, at that point I assumed she was dead, but then at the end we had a really good surprise about her.
Oh yeah, that she actually did have something chasing her. That's when she said that she appeared to Nell that way, and she was very scared of the house. She wanted them to get the hell out of there.
Yeah, it was really very surprising when we found out that she was actually alive the whole time. That
Hmm.
was pretty well done.
Oh yeah, I think so. Um, what did you think about Markham's reaction to his wife's disappearance? Was it that he was um, worried for her, or do you think he was more worried for Nell?
Phew, well, that's an interesting question. It actually looked like he was a bit worried, but more like he would be worried about any human being, not like it was his wife and someone really important to him. It kind of gave the impression that he didn't really get along with her very well.
Correct. Um, it seemed like she was more of a domineering sort. So whenever he was not around her, it seemed like she took charge of the situation, if anything. Which is
Yeah.
why she had no problem going inside the nursery, and in fact, he was very surprised that she wanted to take the nursery room because he told her that they thought that this was the crux, the nucleus of the house, the heart of the house. When he found that cold spot, you know.
Yeah, the cold spot was another thing that we didn't really get to know much about. Like, we found out it was there, and like they wanted to find out more about it, but then we didn't really get to find out why it was there or what its meaning was.
Cool. Did you? What did you think about the statue scene where Russ Tamlin's character Luke was describing what he thought each statue character in that Guardian area? In fact, the fact that they were separated from each other, where they were following that supposed dog, um, and it just so happened that there was a dog on the statue. um, what?
uh, yeah, it kind of gave us a hint that the previous inhabitants of the house were the ghosts haunting the current inhabitants. But yeah, then once again, we didn't really get to know much about it. Yeah, they mentioned they were chasing that dog, but we never really saw the dog, and we didn't even get to hear anything more about it. But that scene with the statues that you mentioned, it kind of had a comic relief moment when was it Theo who compared the look to the dog?
Yeah, this movie seemed to be more about the sounds that you hear, and and the paranoia that the people were feeling, and what they felt, instead of seeing like some kind of ghost, or spectral or anything like that. So everything was based on what they could hear and feel. Don't you think?
Oh, well, yeah, yeah.
I mean, nothing was necessarily seen, to the extent where, you could actually see a ghost. It was more heard, like you heard the old man and the woman screaming, and then the little girl crying. You heard the shaking of the door, and yet you didn't see the door shake.
Indeed.
You heard the pounding, as it started to come near, but you didn't see anyone there.
Well,
Um,
actually, later on, when Luke was there and when he heard the banging too, I think we did see the door getting deformed from someone trying to break in, supposedly ghosts.
Correct, correct, and that is the only physical thing that we see. And the fact that sometimes some of the doors slam shut. Um, Other than that, we don't get a lot of things that you see. You get the describing of what they feel. Like they feel that eyes, like Eleanor screams in the hallway, and that's when Theo pipes in and says, "You feel like someone's looking at you or watching you, don't you?" And she's like, "Yes, that's exactly what I feel." And then,
Yeah.
and that chalk on the
Oh,
wall
oh
scene.
yeah. Oh
We
yeah.
haven't we haven't even mentioned that, where it says, "Help, Eleanor, come home,"
Mm,
which
uh,
makes you feel like Eleanor is the main attraction.
Yeah, I guess the house or whatever was inside the house knew that knew what she was going through and that she would be an easy target.
Quite possibly. Uh, I I mean, I think the house was somewhat drawn to her. In her, she had a loneliness, and I think, because of her mother just recently dying, of her recent experience with death, is a reason for the house to be drawn to her in any respect.
Whew, that's an
So,
interesting thought. I didn't realize that.
but in any case, did you have any favorite scene from this film that you may want to remember?
Whew, well, what we mentioned before, which I found very impressive, was the scene at the beginning of Abigail aging on screen, like when we see her develop from a little girl to an adult and then an old woman. That was, like I said, really impressive for movie as old as this one. So yeah, that was pretty memorable. Also, I liked the introduction where we heard Dr. Markway speak about the house. It was really interesting and really making you want to see more and find out what the whole thing is about. That was really interesting. The scene with the staircase was very suspenseful near the end when Eleanor was climbing up the stairs and Markway going after her. That was a really intense scene for me when I was watching it for the first time.
Oh yeah.
And the jump scares with Grace were also pretty good. Both the one when she popped out from the attic and the one when she was behind the tree. Uh,
Oh yeah. When she came from the yard, that's when she found herself. So, she it's like she was up there with her, and then suddenly she found herself outside. She didn't remember leaving the house. It's like as soon as she left that balcony area, she was outside, and she didn't know how she had gotten there. She had no memory of it, and that's what scared her the most, you know. So
uh, yeah, now that you mention it, isn't it kind of like the ghosts from the house were somehow manipulating her as a part of orchestrating Eleanor's death? Like, uh, like the ghosts made it all happen to Grace in order to make Eleanor do what she did in the end.
correct. Very good point out. It definitely seemed like the ghosts were doing that. So it'll be interesting when we go into talking about the remake, how different
Oh,
it is.
oh wow! now you now you got me curious.
So, in any case, yeah, let's go on. Let's see, the music of this. What did you think about the music?
Well, actually, since I've seen the movie only twice in this, since I watched it for our discussion that we were supposed to have on Monday, yeah, I wasn't paying so much attention to the music. I was more trying to figure out the details of the story since not everything was quite explained in the end. So yeah, I kind of failed to pay
Well,
attention
the
to the
well,
music.
the music was composed by Humphrey Searle, um, and he lived from about 1915 to 1982. Um, he also did a TV series called The Monsters right before this, um, 4 episodes, I guess, in 1962. And I think the other one that I know that he did was in 1957, called The Abominable Snowman. So uh, he did the music behind that particular film, um,
Oh,
by Val Guest. And I know I have it around here somewhere, where it's also been called the Abominable Snowman, the monster of the Himalayas, I guess. But it's been called just the Abominable Snowman, and I guess Peter Cushing was in it. So,
oh.
but in any case, I thought the music went well with the film. Um, Oh, he also did a couple of episodes of Doctor Who in 1965, a couple of years after this. So,
Hmm.
but in any case, I guess my favorite scene would be probably the part where she's hearing the voice of the old man. She's hearing the woman scream and the child cry, and she thinks that she's holding Theo's hand, and then
Oh
when
yeah.
when all of a sudden she screams and she realizes she's not holding Theo's hand, and she was like, "Then whose hand was I holding?"
Yeah. Another question that wasn't answered.
Well, I believe that they were the phantoms of Hill House.
Mm.
You just didn't know.
Oh
You just didn't know who. I mean,
yeah.
the whole thing was set up in the beginning about who died. The rest, you're just supposed to assume that whoever died is haunting the house. So, um,
Mm.
and the spirits just want Eleanor. So I think that's pretty much self-explanatory.
Yeah, I guess.
You just don't get to know which spirit was which. That's all. We're just going to set you up with the haunted house story, and we're just going to leave you to wonder who the hell was fucking with whom.
Yeah.
But in any case, um, yeah, I think that's about all the time that we have for today, folks. But um, I think we've covered much of it. And hopefully you just enjoyed our preambulance on this film. I just enjoy talking about films in general,
Yeah,
um,
same here.
and just love the different scenarios and discussing them with people, and I had fun with this one. So thank you for coming on with me, Boris, and hopefully the audience will enjoy it as well, and use it as a companion piece to once they actually watch the film. And when you watch a film, gain your own opinion from it and what you think, who you thought haunted Hill House. So, in any
Yeah.
case, thank you for listening. Have a great day, evening, or morning, wherever you are. And before you spend the night in a house, make sure that you really want to, if it's haunted.
Yeah, that's very true.
So, good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Dave, for having me on your show.